Hi, welcome everybody. We're going to get going. Thank you for joining us, and thanks especially to Sarah, Dr. Sarah Forbes-Robertson. Some of you may remember that I spoke very highly of her when we were in Dubai, and she is back by popular demand because what she spoke about then, and I'm sure what she will speak about today, was no less than fascinating. And even the title itself is intriguing and something I had to look up. But when Sarah explained it, things became clearer. So before I introduce Sarah, I'll tell you a little bit about her. Sarah is the course director at Coventry University in the UK. And she is also the founder of the pioneering cold case unit there and has redefined how forensic DNA is taught and applied. And I really believe she has done this listening to her presentation. She gives students the chance to work on real life cold cases with international partners, amongst other exciting things. And today, Sarah joins us from Coventry University, from her lab. And the background that you will see when Sarah presents is, in fact, her laboratory where she works. And today she is going to flip the script on the Panopticon again, and her title is Life Will Find a Way. So welcome, Sarah. It's
Thank
wonderful
you
to
very
have
much.
you back with us. Thank you so much. So I don't know,
I'm
before we
afraid I
go
had
on,
to relocate to a classroom.
oh no,
We've
it
got
was so
too much in
exciting
my lab,
when you were in
too much
lab.
life.
Oh, that's fine. Well, it's lovely to have you back here. Sarah, I think that I have introduced you, but
Oh,
what I think I would really like is if there's anything else that I missed in terms of introducing you that you do, it would be great to get a short background with the work you do at Coventry and how you found yourself where you are.
I'd be more than happy to. Let me show you some pictures. Things always go better with pictures, I think. So if I zip up to this one. Oops. Let's start at the beginning, not the end. It was always a good shout. So my name is Sarah Forbes-Robertson, and I'm the, can you all see that first off?
Yes, everything okay.
Okay, thank you. I'm the course director for our BSc Biological and Forensic Sciences here at Coventry University. And that's quite a unique undergraduate program where we have a mix of biology, DNA, physiology, and also the forensic sciences. So it gives people a really interesting mix with it. And my students are interesting and interested, I think. So my background, before I did that, my research mostly focuses on ancient DNA or historic DNA, I'm often told, because it's only 500 years old. So hopefully you all know Henry VIII, King of England, who had famously had the 6 wives. So I extracted DNA from the bones from one of his favorite warships that was sunk in a battle with France in Portsmouth. And so I was lucky enough to have access to these bones and quite free reign to apply some of the forensics techniques, like looking at hair color, eye color, skin color, those externally visible characteristics, looking at ancestry, looking at the SNPs related to that, looking at blood type as well. I find myself slightly odd, I think, that I was very excited to find out that one of my 500-year-old dead sailors was blood type B. But that's... and also working very closely with colleagues in engineering, who where I work now as well. This was before in Swansea, looking at micro CT scanning. So this is a micro CT, and you can see the inside of the skull of somebody who died 500 years ago. And the skull is perfectly intact, so it's still all there. And we were tasked with extracting DNA from it. And you can see at the top in a minute, it will show you an arrow wound that this person was carrying from before the battle. This wasn't actually what killed him. And it was really only when we did the micro CT of this that we realized quite how close that had come to going all the way through and would have killed him at the time. So I'm always interested in pushing the forensic science further and really looking at things that are innovative and bring new techniques to it. I'm lucky in that I work in a research lab, I work in a university, so although we have very strict ethics, we're not looking necessarily at cases. We're freer to investigate those different things. And in Coventry, really, our mission is to train our students to be creative, innovative, thoughtful leaders. and use lots of simulations, disruptors, labs, crime scene simulations. I am famous with my students, I'm afraid, we have these beautiful crime scene houses. If at some point, if I have 5 minutes, I'll either take a video and post it here later so you can see. We have 2 terraced houses within the university, within this building that I'm in now. And when you walk into them, they have video cameras so that we can leave the room and leave our students there to see what they do. And when I first did that, I asked my students, do you want the practice run to be exactly the same as the actual one? And they said yes. And I was like, really, exactly the same? And they went, yes, it's quite terrifying enough being in this simulation, like being in this crime scene that you've mocked up and not knowing what's going on. There's lots, I mean, you guys will know if you've been crime scene examiners, there's lots of details there. There's lots of things for them to wrap their heads around. And so it's already challenging enough. So I thought, okay, we'll have them be the same. But I went to my partner, my now husband, who has 16 years as a police trainer, and said, what's the most annoying thing at crime scenes? And he said, paramedics. Hands down, it's paramedics. They arrive, okay, they save lives, but they leave mess, they leave DNA, they leave blood, they move things around. So I went to my paramedic colleagues in Coventry University, and I'm used to working in a multidisciplinary way, and said, could you come and walk through our crime scene and see how many of our students actually stop you? And the first time they did it, so we had at that point 120 students in groups of 30 stood outside our crime scene house in their Tyvek suits, absolutely terrified for their lives of what was going to possess them. And our paramedics walked through like, okay, yeah, boss, just go to the crime scene. Yeah. And they said, what should we do? And I said, well, see how many of my students stop you. And the answer sadly was 2 out of 120. The rest kind of looked at me like, was that a thing? And so they're well used to. One student did chase after them, was straight off trying to catch them. And when he got them, apparently, he caught them on the stairs and said, oh, have you just come from the crime scene? They said, yes. And they went, and who are you? And he went, and got very shy and had to leave. Mercifully, he came straight back to me. Although I'm mean to my students, I do also think that we try and provide a safe space for them to learn all this stuff. And so he came back to me, what do I do? What do I do in those circumstances? I said, show them your name badge. And we've now printed off little crime scene examiner name badges for them so that they can flash their card and they know what to do in that. And so we use disruptors, we use we have the resources, we have nice simulation facilities, but it's not about that. It's about the creativity. It's about what secret sauce you can bring to that to get students thinking. Those are my lunatics from a couple of years ago who've all now graduated. I do have their permission to show these pictures, but you can see how excited they are to be in the crime scene simulations. And I think I have a horrible feeling that's probably real blood on that, but it's definitely from a victim and not from my student. So we do lots of simulations. Because my idea is that really I want to open their minds so that we can create the next Carey Mullis, the next Alec Jeffreys, so that we can really kind of push the boundaries of the thinking in the field. Because these guys are coming to it, they don't have the preconceptions necessarily that we have. So they're coming to it like, well, maybe that's possible. Let's see. Like, what else could we do? What other aspects could we bring in? So they definitely keep me young. And one of my favorite modules that we did recently is called Forensic Futures. So this was one of my babies as a module. And it was pick any cold case you like and any technique that you think could have application to forensic science that's not being used at the moment. And explore how that particular technique could be brought to bear on the cold case and what new leads it would generate. So we really asked them to think about the new leads, but to really kind of go down all the rabbit holes, just find a cold case and find out what you could have. We do give them teaching on it. So we have guest lecturers from some fantastic colleagues here in Coventry and around about the place. So I talk to them about mitochondrial DNA and SNPs and EVCs and biogeographic ancestry. Our colleagues in the educational technology department came in to give them a demonstration of VR, which was hilarious. I've got all my students wearing the headsets looking like they are in some other world. Fantastic colleague of mine talked to them about GDPR and AI and how all our data is being used and how we can rebel against that. My husband talked to them about forensic linguistics and how he pretended to be a 16-year-old girl swapping in a child abuse and didn't do very well at copying the language of a 16-year-old girl. One of my colleagues in forensic psychology, talked to them about predictors of domestic violence. Our lovely course director for cyber and ethical hacking came to talk to them about cyber, one of the counties in the UK, who came in to talk to them about his experiences. And then I talked to them about coursework. But what I really loved about this was they really kind of took it and played with it. So they chose techniques like mass spectrometry, air DNA, eDNA, environmental DNA, alternate light sources that make bones glow in a way that rocks don't, 3D printing to share evidence files across continents, and to allow osteologists in another place to generate their own copy, microbiome of body fluids, molecular photofits. And the cases they chose were all really interesting as well. It's lovely module to mark and coursework to mark. I'm very happy that one of my students did choose the most recent DNA hit of the year, The Boy in the Box. And he was ecstatic when I told him that one, that he was like, yes, my case that I chose. It did give my internal moderator a little bit of pause for thought. So he opened up one of the Black Dahlia case ones when he was moderating. He's not a forensic scientist. So to open it up to find somebody with the bits of their body in two separate places it gave him a bit of a shock. And they chose like heads that with the red rubber balls replacing the eyes bouncing off the back of trucks in America. One of my favorites was Allow Me to Introduce You to the New Orleans Axeman. So they really got into the spirit of it and chose some really, really interesting cases. And some very famous cases, some really not very famous cases. And they hunted down the original documents and presented those and presented the new leads that it could come up. But there was one student in particular that when I first read it, it's absolutely my bailiwick. It's absolutely my area. So he was talking about using molecular photofits, so externally visible characteristics to look at hair color, eye color, skin color, and also the genealogy databases. So looking at those public genealogy databases to generate leads. And so it's stuff that I've read papers on it. I know it in my bones, but something about the way he wrote it really made me think, no, hang on a mo, this could be massive. Like this could really, we could be standing on the verge of another revolution in how we use DNA to solve cases with the access to these DNA, the public databases, the commercial databases run by Ancestry.me, 23andMe, all those different companies. Like this, you could look at DNA that was left on a piece of chewing gum at a scene and create somebody's face, potentially, know their biogeographic ancestry, track them down through their relatives. That could be huge. And he spoke about it like, yeah, this is just around the corner. And it really struck me. I spent several days thinking about the way he wrote this essay. To be fair, his father is a police officer. So he's been absolutely schooled in several things, but he's very so kind of innocent in some ways. And for him, this is, yes, absolutely. We do all these things. We solve the crimes. That's what it's about. And he could almost see into the future in a way that I knew the pieces, but I'd never put them together in such a compelling way as he wrote in his essay. And this also built for me in the way that these particular students doing that module then went on to do their final year projects. The fact that they kind of don't necessarily see limits to what they can do or what they can bring. So this is one of my lovely students who's now going on to do a master's in anthropology. And she fought for 2 years to be able to do forensic reconstruction. I say fought, we fought together. It was a novel thing for us. We can do she 3D printed the skull from CT scans, had to speak to colleagues in radiology, had to speak to colleagues in the clay studio where they're used to doing cars. You can see the car in the background. They're used to modeling the cars. But it's in the arts studio and we are in the science department. So forging those links between those, and they loved her. They put her right front and center doing this amazing project, because I'm sure, as you all know, there's something about that sort of looking at those skulls that makes people interested. So everyone from the department would walk past and go, oh, what's that? She did bring a lot of talent to it. So the picture at the back of the lady's face, that's actually one of her drawings. I know it looks like a photo, but those are her drawings of that. And her dissertation was fantastic to read. Another student really took on board the genes involved in the prediction of human facial morphology. So he mapped, I think we had over 2,000 genes, 2,000 SNPs as candidates. And this is something that's coming, but way in the future. And he picked those and then requested me to take photos and take DNA. And he would then match up if he thought the photo was of the person, which led me to go around my university asking my colleagues to take photos very much like mugshots. He then came back to me, the student, and said, well, I don't know how to analyze the photos. And I'm like, what do you mean you don't know how to analyze the photos? He said, well, you didn't include a ruler. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's my fault. I didn't include a ruler. You're right. It's not. So I went back and took them again. And then he said, I really, really want to measure nostril widths. So I had to go to several of my colleagues and ask them to take the last photo that you can see there, looking up their noses, trying not to laugh, because at this point, invariably, I am bursting out laughing. And they're like, don't make me laugh while you're taking a photo up my nose. So we looked at doing, you can tell, unfortunately, my colleague here is not doing a very good job at not laughing when I take your photo up her nose. But everyone was really, really interested in taking part in this project and interested in looking at these different things. And it got me thinking that where it's important is to kind of harness that energy and to bring that to bear in all the fantastic things that DNA for Africa and Vanessa and all her team are creating, and all the legislation that we're bringing in. Because we're very used to, in the forensic science, like we have the regulation, we have the laws, we have the restrictions, we have the GDPR, we have the privacy and all of those things baked in. And it is very true that forensic science, deservedly so, is very conservative. It lags behind the science by about 20 to 30 years, and I think it should. So excellent reasons, because we are very aware of the sensitive nature of the data that we handle. I am always very, very careful to abide by all the ethics that we have and to be very clear what we are examining when we look at this. One of my colleagues from the Clay Studio, who's an artist and a sculptor, got so fascinated by when we were talking about the biogeographic ancestry project that he was like, I want to take part. I'm like, okay, but I have to tell you, I am looking at your continental ancestry. I'm not going to tell you you're like 2% Viking and what I'm looking, and these are the limitations to it, and it's probabilistic, and equally, this is not an official kit or an official test for these things. So it's always bringing that to bear, and it's balancing out the enthusiasm for the students with, yes, but you also have to think very carefully about the real fundamental importance of this DNA that you're handling. But the thing that struck me while I was out in Dubai as well, and I'll come on to that in a minute, but also by talking to my students, is that's my world, that's our world as experienced forensic science lecturers, forensic science practitioners, forensic science legislators. That's where we think in those terms. But my students and the general public really don't. And it keeps me alive working with my students to what their world is like, because I live in their world, unfortunately. It's definitely their world. They're the ones inheriting it. And they will pay companies to extract their DNA and analyze it and keep all the data. They will happily sign these things away. For the last 7 years, I've been asking my students, have you done one of these tests? Had at first yes, it's £50. Yeah, absolutely. And now it's going off again. And I don't know if that's just they won't tell me. They won't admit to me that they paid somebody else. And they go, yeah, sure, have my very important data and keep it and sell it to other people. But one of my graduates, who's now actually a lecturer in our group, has all his SNP data, and he has an app that he uses to analyze newly published results. And I did microarrays way back when. And I was like, yeah, I'd have my DNA sequenced, but not by one of these companies. So very thinking the combination of the biology, the enthusiasm of the students, and the legislation, really bringing that all together so that we develop something that's fit for everybody, really, without overselling it. And while I say, I like to keep my data private, my husband teaches surveillance and investigative interviewing and fraud management. And he is very not share this with anyone. So he's, when I moved to Coventry, he was, need to know our address. And I was like, you're right, why do they? Oh no, they need my address so they can deliver me pizza. No, this is okay. This is a fair use of my data. And I have to say that even I, who like to keep my data private, do give it away for fun. So a certain company with small monsters know where my car is parked, know where my house is, know where my work is, know where my local shops are, know how many steps I take a day. And I pay them to track this data. And I'm really thinking back to what my colleague on AI and GDPR and privacy laws is saying. I really must have a look at their terms and conditions again, because I think I may have just ticked something I shouldn't have done. And when I went to Dubai, Coventry University actually tracked my personal phone. This is not a work phone. And my husband actually, for the first time, went, can I track you as well? And I was like, yes, absolutely. Know that I'm safe. So we think it's very much like, no, things should be kept private, apart from the things I want to give away. And it's an interesting area, which brings me to the Panopticon. So the Panopticon is a Victorian concept invented by Jeremy Bentham. So he used 1748 to 1832, and he was a utilitarianist. So his view, he was very much involved in the regulation of information, the regulation of how people should live their lives. And utilitarianism is that to be ethical, you have to do the most good or do the least harm. And I think that sounds, we kind of all live by that, and we abide by that, but he was the first person to actually come up with it. One of the other things that he came up with is this thing called the Panopticon. So this was, at the time, a way to keep prisons more efficient. So if you bear in mind, this is Victorian England, and there was very much a Christian worldview of God-fearing people, that if you had done wrong and ended up in prison, he invented this prison where it's very much like the modern sci-fi ones, where you have a central point that overlooks a circle or a hemisphere of different prison cells. So everyone feels that they are being watched at some point. So it's all kept dark, so you don't know when the person in the front is looking at you. But this is that you feel like maybe you're being watched, so you must act carefully, act responsibly, and act well. And so this was the idea that he brought about. Another oddness about Jeremy Bentham is he liked being involved, he liked watching things. So he actually asked for his body after he passed away to be stuffed and to be put in the middle of University College London, which is where I did my PhD and where he was a founder member of the college. So he could keep an eye on things even after he passed away. And of course, this is an old-fashioned university, so they did it. They went, yes, sure, come to all of our university meetings as a stuffed. But his head, unfortunately, they played football with it and it got slightly damaged, so they had to replace it with a wax head. But that is actually his skeleton in his clothes, as per his will. And so this founder of the idea of surveillance, really what kind of underpins our surveillance, and the sense of always being in fear of being watched and wanting to take part in these things. So this was one of the ones that very few of the Panopticons were built. So this was one in Illinois that's now fallen, unfortunately, into disrepair. And there was one in Cuba, and when I went out to Cuba, I desperately wanted to go and see it, but unfortunately, it is now rather destroyed, and it takes 3 days to get there by small boat. And I got a bit scared at that point and didn't do it. It's not unlike maybe the CCTV Central. This is, we have them in London, Cardiff, all sorts of things. So the idea that you are still in this day and age being watched by Big Brother, the CCTV that is everywhere for your safety, and that nothing is private when you're out on the street in the public domain. So to really kind of look into this, like, how do people feel about surveillance in the modern age? How do our students feel about surveillance? Do they still feel the same way that Jeremy Bentham did back in 1748? So they put a camera mounted on his auto icon, his embalmed body, in 2015 and 2016, and it watched the students as they came in. It was called Panopticon. So there's a little camera on top of the box, and it watched students going about their business. Some protested. So, Jeremy, do I look at you while you I look like you while I look at you, looking at me, looking at you? Some people did play with the anonymity of it, but some others, some of our students thought, yes, Big Brother is watching me. Hello, Big Brother, let me go viral. Watch me now. Watch me do my TikTok dances. Watch me go about my different dances. They are kept private for the research, so we can't actually see their names or their faces. But these students were willingly giving that up. They were like, yes, I want to be famous. I want to be on the Panopticon. So I think Jeremy Bentham would be absolutely rolling in his box if he knew this was happening. This goes far beyond what he thought. So people are paying to put their data on the internet, to put their likeness, to put their TikTok dances, to put where they eat or their food, and they put far more data on there than he would ever have dreamed of. Show off their breakfasts. Big Brother house is a bit boring on television, so people get naked on TV or get married without having seen their new partner, just because just being on TV is boring, to spice things up. And it really struck me when I was in Dubai how we have this kind of world of legislation, this world of regulation, this world of the law, which is absolutely vitally important, don't get me wrong, but it's restrictive. It's designed to be restrictive. It has to be. And yet, as a biologist, walking away from the kind of fancy facades of the Dubai towards the beach, I decided to go for a beach because I always want to go and see the sea, no matter where I am. In Coventry, I'm as far as possible as it is to get from the sea. So I walked along and saw kind of a little bit, I don't mean this in a negative way, but like life popping up in unexpected corners, a little bit like weeds coming up through the cracks. As a biologist, I know that life always finds a way. Dandelions pop up in the UK. Wherever lichen will go, oh, that's an interesting rock, I'm going to grow on that. Not where we expect it. So this richness of life and marrying it to the restrictions of the legislation, I think it's really important to get people like you guys involved. Obviously, I know I'm preaching to the converted because you're all here, you are already involved, but really just to stress how important what you're doing is to get that marriage of modern cultures, lots of different cultures as well, because in biology, it's people that we're legislating. DNA fundamentally is life and is people. And so we had an example on television, just to kind of wrap this up, where we have a Who Do You Think You Are television series. And one of the actors who was in Doctor Who, I'm not sure if any of you recognize them, and he found out that his father is not his father on television. His father had actually passed away and his parents had separated briefly before his birth. So we kind of know what happened during that brief separation. And he found out that he had a half-sister on television. And when he was asked, do you want to meet your half-sister, from the father you never knew existed, he said, oh, I don't know, won't that be a big shock for her? And I am shouting at the television at this point. I'm like, you put your DNA on the database. She knows. She got an alert on her phone. You have a new sibling. You have a new member of your family. And it's keeping abreast of these new things I'm learning about myself and my family, with it and to work through it, because we know it's not just our data. So this is my family tree. There's me in orange. I have a brother and a sister and 2 nieces and a nephew, and they have had children, and we have brand new one as of last year. And they all share their DNA with me. So if one of them goes and puts it on 23andMe, that's me out on that DNA database. That if they do one of those tests, and they all work in like acting and all sorts of things. They do films and oddness. they don't have the sort of understanding of the DNA. They don't get how far back. It's not just me. You're getting everybody back in our family tree. And if you track back far enough, we are all related, as we know from that. And it's really the reason I think I'm passionate about it's important to get this right is we looked at the biogeographic aims, so the aims ancestry informative marker set in projects. And we had a project student who was interested in looking at, it was from a paper that was published on Venezuelan families, showing that maternally, they were very Venezuelan origin, but paternally, very European, which says some not great things about our history. But she asked me, she was very interested in looking at that, and she wanted to kind of look at the continental ancestry. So she asked me again to recruit participants. So she asked me to recruit participants. She wouldn't know their biogeographic ancestry. She would then predict their continental ancestry just from the SNPs that we chose. And so this is my husband, this is my lovely husband, and I chose him as my absolute Irish, English, white man, born and raised in Coventry, where his entire family from Coventry. And when we tracked down when we looked at his ancestry on the genetics, she told me who it was. And every single one of his SNPs came back of African ancestry. And I stand by her data. I absolutely stand by her data. It's probabilistic, of course. But it was an interesting conversation to go back, because obviously he's interested in this. He was like, so what am I? What continental ancestry have I got? And I was like, right, so, yeah, every single one of your markers has come back as African ancestry. And we're not talking like everyone has African. He's like, thankfully, his reaction, I was worried that he might think, he's also a lawyer by training, I have to say, and that sort of data really would spark him some concerns in him potentially. But he was like, yes, fantastic. Oh, I've got some stories to tell. And I was like, okay. I mean, I love all that DNA side of things, but I thought the shock of that might be interesting for him. But he absolutely loved it. I did have to restrain him. His daughter has recently married a lovely Nigerian gentleman, and that on the first few times that they met, my husband wanted to go up and go, I'm black too. I'm like, please don't do that. Please, 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 please don't do that. It's not till you've got to know him. They have now discussed it and they both love it, but that may not go down well, let's just say. So within that, I just think it's really important for our students to hear about, not just to hear the intricacies, the complexities of what you guys do on a daily basis, and also the kind of stories about when it doesn't quite go to plan, as it were. So it's not like I predicted this person was this and they came out as this, because it's that complexity where the richness lies. We do have some access thanks to the fantastic ICAP project, so the International Cold Case Analysis Program, which is run by the Lower Saxony Police Force in Germany. And Torsten, who has organized this, does a fantastic job of really liaising with the United States, Great Britain, France, the Netherlands, Australia, Kenya, Germany, Austria, Croatia, Slovenia, North Macedonia, and Italy. My students have to deal with actual cold cases from the Lower Saxony Police Force, bring new leads to it, very much like our Forensics Futures module. But then they're also looking at, how do we deal with these different time zones? How do I have a meeting with somebody about a case when the team leader is in Australia and half the team are in the Paris Gendarmerie or in the US on different time zones? So they really grow up fast on this. And it brings a responsibility to them to know that they are dealing with people, with actual cold cases for that. Because I have to say, they think in different ways. So for me, 1970 was 30 years ago, 1980 was 20 years ago, 2000 was just 10 years ago, 2010 was 10 years ago, 2017, let's not talk about that one, 2020, that was just last year. I mean, so it's moving really in ways, it moves very fast. So that didn't quite, I have another one. My appeal to you is to adopt a student or a course, because it will keep you young at heart. So if you are brave enough, you can adopt a school child, go to a homework club and really see. So I used to get 14 and 16-year-olds to design my primers for ancient DNA, and they loved it. They were just my minions. They were my mini-me's. They would do all my work for me. And we have Nuffield Foundation. Sorry, apologies for the ugly slide. These are my graduates. But if you don't have, so I know a lot of you may well have children that are keeping you young at heart. But if you wish to keep up to date with what's going on with modern day students, if you don't have, don't do that. If you don't have any universities close to you, come to mine. We have the Forensics Futures. We are desperate for we have collaborative online interactive learning, and we would love to have a guest lecture from any of you talking about the cases that you've experienced, or maybe send us some recordings of talks that you've given, because we would absolutely love to hear from you. And my students would be elated to meet with you and to see you. I'm just upset they're not here at the moment. They start again in September. So that's it from me. I will stop sharing those slides. Oops.
Hi, Sarah. Can you
Hello.
hear me? Thank you, thank you. Well, I hope that your call to action does initiate. I mean, I know just working in the environments that I do, that the number and the types of cases that we deal with are quite extraordinary.
Yeah.
And I certainly have a few people that I know that would probably love to get in touch, and I hope that they do. And thanks, thanks for those insights. I think it's really interesting how as you say, the youth seem not to shy away from the amount of data that's sort of being gleaned out of us all. So, maybe we have to look at it and embrace it differently. It brings me to a question. I remember in Dubai when we met, we were part of a panel, you were in the panel, and I was moderating it. And one of the questions I asked was what you thought the next generation see as the most exciting or sexy areas in forensic science, the spaces where they believe that they can actually make a real difference. And I don't know if you recall me asking you that, and if you can draw back on what you answered and what you thought, or just sort of ad hoc right now, what you think that they see as the most exciting areas going forward in forensic science, where they can make a difference.
In the biological and forensic sciences degree, the one that I'm course director for, it's definitely the DNA, thankfully. But I think they view it in, they see the future definitely as being those big databases and the accessibility to those things, what that would bring. But they also, thankfully, they are quite broad in their interests. So it's not like everybody picked mitochondrial DNA. They really, they think about carefully what they're interested in, and it's quite different across different students. But for the biology, they were looking at the forensic linguistics, cyber. It's definitely the future for them, I'm afraid, is cyber.
Yes, yes.
And I worry about the AI.
It is. We spoke about it this morning in another meeting I had about how authentic assessments are going to be carried out going forward, and maybe there's going to be a move towards more authenticity. So I think we do have to watch the space and see how it plays out. I was quite interested to hear how one of the students were taking their own snips and their own data and putting it through AI to generate his own analysis, so to speak. That's quite terrifying, specifically without any genetic counseling or what kind of information is being returned. And I wonder if anybody in the audience, who might be in this field has any questions. I'd love to hear any concerns or questions, and possibly to ask Sarah as well while we're on the subject. But that is something, Sarah, that I think is quite daunting.
What was worrying, so I'm also an academic conduct officer, so I do interviews with students who've been accused of plagiarism or misuse of AI, and I had a whole spate of interviews yesterday, but I'm always coming at it from an education point of view. But we had an interesting one where the student was adamant that they hadn't used ChatGPT, they hadn't used any AI. And it took about 30 minutes of gentle questioning. And finally, they said, no, I Googled it. I'm like, you can't have Googled it because that reference does not exist. It won't come up on a Google. And then they said, no. And we said, okay, talk.
Oh, broke up.
Shoot.
Sarah, sorry, you broke up there. Can you just repeat that last sentence? Oh.
Share your screen with us, show us. And he went, yeah, I did, it's different. And it was the ChatGPT that snuck into AI.
Okay, yes.
So that was an interesting insight.
You've broken up a little bit with that last sort of response, so I'm just going to move on because it was slightly broken up, but maybe this will also sort of address it. How do you think universities, and I talk about academia because I think they're quite an important aspect, or even what we call citizens of science, play a role in developing and promoting novel forensic techniques and approaches, and specifically with regards to the context of AI? Have you thought about how universities can play an active role in that? Because you want to, as you say, keep developing, keep students interested in learning, as opposed to just, literally taking information and spitting it out. Have you thought about how universities could be involved in developing and promoting forensic techniques, novel approaches going forward?
But I think the links with the cold case units and things like that are critical for that, but also the authentic assessments, as you said. So having, we actually make our students do the thing. We have UCAS accreditation exercises. I'm sure everyone has the accreditation exercises, and we put them through mocks of that. So we assess their techniques live. It's massively intensive on staff, but it gets them prepared for what they'll have to do in the UK. They'll have to do those on a regular basis. And they love it. They love being in the house. They're terrified. There's always tears. But they appreciate that the best way to assess somebody's ability to extract DNA, extract RNA is to watch them do it, to actually, as opposed to write about it.
Okay.
And that the AI can't help them with that. And they do enjoy that. I have so one of my colleagues, Dr. Huma Shah, is fantastic on the AI and the citizen science. And she is really pushing for people to own their data and to be more savvy about where their data is going. And so I will happily send a link to some of her things, but she had my students entranced in a lecture where just going, go on your laptop. How many times have you clicked this button? How many times have you given away your left kidney to somebody? So I think
that. So one of the questions that I'm reading in the chat is, do you think AI can influence unbalanced or biased conclusions to results? And I think I can see it's from Donald Mashove. Hello, Donald. I think what he means by that is that, can it maybe overcome biased conclusions? So, is there a benefit in having an objective, unbiased influence, such as AI, over results or reports that could possibly be biased by the sort of human error or human influence or human subjectivity?
I think it's a really interesting question, because I think where I've been investigating, we've been told by the university we have to embrace AI, we have to embrace this in the university because it's the new thing. And I'm intrigued by what the border is between algorithm and AI. And I think we all nobody can analyze DNA profiles without using some form of algorithm. It's all filtered. It's all got that. So I think the algorithms have come in there. But for me, fundamentally, the AI can't be on a witness stand. You can't test its methods. You can't ask it how it came to those conclusions. So I think it's important that we draw the line between the algorithm that we can explain and the black box that we can't. But I'd be very interested to hear your team's and the audience's view on where they draw the line between an algorithm that we all happily use and AI black box.
Well, I don't know if we'll get the answer here, but it may be something that I'll put out in one of my newsletters going forward. And I think that
Donald, I'd be very interested to know what your view is on it.
Donald, you can type it in the box if you have an answer to that, or send me an email and I can send it on to Sarah.
I've collected some interesting papers on it actually, and I think one of them did put it very starkly like that. Like if an expert witness, you can ask, why did you do that? What's the basis for your analysis? You can be cross-examined in a way that an AI just won't.
Well, this is it. So I think again, it comes down to authentic assessment, and I suppose that can be applied across the board, not only in academia, but as you say, sort of in real life scenarios. But I think the smarter that AI gets, sometimes for instance, one of the conversations that we had this morning, in the same one around AI, is that some of the students are subjected to relatively old lecturers who are basically regurgitating the same script, year and year again, and that what they can find, the relevant information that they can find either through AI or on the website is much more interesting for them. Yeah. So, again, it's this balance one has to find going forward, and I think that we're not quite there, but I think that it is seeking it, and I think that AI and kids are smarter than we ever were, and it's about how we're going to navigate that going forward with the correct balance. And I'm sure
I
you
did
you
hear
find
an interesting analogy the other day, which is if you think of AI and ChatGPT, not specifically artificial intelligence, because I think when that comes on board, that'll be different, but the large language models we have at the moment, if you compare them to a trained pigeon. So if you can replace, we used AI for this with, used a trained pigeon. So identifying cancer cells down a microscope, a trained pigeon identified cancer cells. Yes, this makes sense to me. A trained pigeon sifted through the CVs for a job. No, that needs a
okay.
human touch.
Yes, exactly. Okay. No, I get that. Sarah, is there anything else that you want to add before we close off? I think again, it's been fascinating, and I don't know if there's anything you want to add, or if you want anybody to reach out to you with any questions.
If anybody would like to come and give an online talk, we can happily do them through Teams. We can organize different time zones. My students would be more than happy they would love to hear from your experiences. But I'm also intrigued by what inspired all of you to get into this area. Vanessa, what inspired you?
Well, unfortunately, it was the death of my father. So it was an adverse event where my dad was murdered, and so I mean I was a commercial lawyer. I was rather boring. So I've come into the world of forensic science via that. A lot of people who are working in this, I think, do have a calling for whatever reason. And certainly the reason they stay is because they have a passion, because it's not for everybody.
No.
So yes, it is. But as you say, there's an intersection between science and ethics and law that cannot be escaped. And that for me is what I find most compelling, is how those three things are continuously, the regulation, the ethics, and the science, and they're not necessarily evolving at the same time. So there's sometimes a lag and a catch up. And you mentioned that you touched on it in your presentation too. So that's certainly something that keeps me going, and I love interacting with students because I find that their viewpoints are really that's the future. So it's very important, and I feel very privileged to be able to stay in academia for that reason, because it's the only way that we are going to, as educators, stay relevant by understanding what it is that that is out there, and it's often through the students that we are introduced to it. So I think going forward, there's a lot. As you mentioned, to be grateful for with regards to how it can assist forensic science, because we see it. But there are a lot of red flags that we need to, and this is where my lawyer ethics brain comes in, that we have to be careful about. And I think that could be the takeaway message from me in any event, that beware. Yeah, be forewarned. Be
But
forewarned,
also,
beware.
I think it's important because as lawyers, as expert witnesses, we're explaining things to the lay public. So the jury will be made up of lay public. We've got judges who aren't necessarily scientists, and it's those miscarriages of justice that creep in when somebody doesn't quite understand the area. So my husband will kill me for this one, but we had a conversation the other day, and I said, "Oh, the student's done this," and he went, "But there are only two chromosomes, right?" And I was like, I'm sorry now. So he's a trained policeman and trained as a barrister, and I was like, come again? And he said, yeah, there's only the X and the Y chromosome. And I was like,
Okay.
right. And he's not by any means, like, he's incredibly smart in his area, and he's known me for many, many years, and somehow still thinks there's two chromosomes. And I'd be happy to have him on a jury.
But he didn't say XX, and you could have agreed with him and said, yes, there is only women.
There's the only important ones.
Only does. Well, thank you so
again,
much. And
thank
thank you
you
to
so much.
everybody who's joined. And this is going to be recorded and disseminated, because I know a lot of people weren't able to make it, but really had an interest in the subject. And thank you for explaining what a panopticon is. And I think it's absolutely fascinating that this notion, now it's called a panopticon, which is brilliant, is continuing in every aspect of our life, and and the implications of it. So,
lives on.
yes. So final words from you before we say goodbye to everybody. And thank you again for being here with us today.
just thank you so much for the invitation, and thank you everybody in the audience. And by all means, if you want to come and meet my students online, they would be more than happy to. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And we look forward to having you in Africa again soon, I hope. Well,
I would love to, yes.
Come here too. Thank you so much. All the best. Take care, Sarah. We'll speak to you soon. Bye. Bye.